Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook for October 4th, 2025. We're going to go over the latest models for the signal that we are watching in the MDR next week that could potentially be a pretty decent hurricane. Whether or not it is going to impact the islands remains to be seen, and it depends on model by model, which model actually shows impacts occurring to the islands. But we'll go over all of the models from the GFS to the Euro and even the ensembles. We're also going to go over more than, of course, stuff happening in the Atlantic because there is activity in the Pacific as well that we need to go over too. So let's get started with that. Of course, starting off first in the Atlantic Basin, and we have two areas of interest here, although one of them in the Gulf of Mexico, a low pressure system that has absolutely no chance of development of occurring. This is literally a 0% chance in the next 48 hours or the next 7 days. And so you're wondering why the National Hurricane Center might have even marked this. Well, this is generally a part of a low pressure system here, where there was a low pressure in the Bahamas, and I guess there's another one in the Gulf. This is generally going to bring heavy rainfall to the northern Gulf Coast and the southeast over the next several days, and that will be a threat, that will cause impacts to people's plans. And again, heavy rainfall, regardless of whether or not it's caused by a tropical system, can be a nuisance. So I guess that's why the National Hurricane Center mentioned it. But of course, in terms of this actually potentially developing into a named tropical system, there is no chance. So no need to worry about this in terms of tropical development. But we do have to watch the MDR, obviously. And the latest National Hurricane Center advisory, at least update, is at 2 o'clock, which came out obviously around 2 hours ago. And now the formation chances of this are up to 60% in the next 7 days. 48 hours are still low at 10%. We're looking more at a development occurring sometime next week rather than shortly within the next several days. And again, we're going to have to watch this as this generally heads in a west-northwest to slightly northwest direction. And you do see that in the area of potential development, the islands are included in here, especially the central to northeastern Caribbean islands. So you guys there are going to have to keep on top of this area very, very closely, although there is still a little bit of uncertainty with the track right now, depending on the model. The GFS, for instance, develops this and I use the GFS for the thumbnail card. They actually make this a pretty decent hurricane, but luckily they veer this just north of the islands. So a little bit of uncertainty with the track right now, but in general, there will be development heading towards the islands, and obviously we'll be monitoring this very closely over the next several days. In the Eastern Pacific, we have quite a bit to talk about in terms of activity. We have Tropical Storm Octave, which is at 60 miles per hour and 1,000 millibars pressure right now, although this is not really a concern in terms of impacts, but obviously it is a tropical storm. We also have Invest 99E, which is at an 100% chance of development. In fact, I am pretty sure advisories on Tropical Storm Priscilla, which is the next name on the list, are going to be issued at 5 o'clock Eastern time. So I'm pretty much already going to regard the fact that this is a tropical storm now. So we have 99E, probably about to be Tropical Storm Priscilla in a few minutes here. And then we also have a new area, and this could potentially develop and continue the gravy train of activity here in the Eastern Pacific. And this is up to a 60% chance of development in the next 7 days. Of course, development chance right now in the next 48 hours is low, but lots of activity happening here in the Eastern Pacific. First of all, though, let's take a satellite imagery look at the Atlantic, and you can see we have our wave here in the Eastern Atlantic. Has some structure to it, definitely has some low-level turn, but it is broad right now. It's not yet, obviously, near anywhere close to being a tropical system, but obviously we're going to have to watch it as it continues in the MDR here over the next several days, and watch as this develops and potentially heads close to the northern Caribbean islands as we get towards the end of next week. And then we have here, first of all, you can see quite potent remnants of Imelda still prevalent on satellite imagery. And then from that, a front that's kind of hanging down here over pretty much the entire central Atlantic. And then from the leftovers of the front, we have a few areas of low pressure here. Looks like there's a trough or something like it, here just east of the Bahamas. There's also an upper level low somewhere in here, and that is causing some shear and dry air in the northern MDR, which will be something that we need to watch and see how that plays out with our wave here. And then we have another low pressure here, as you can see, in the Gulf of Mexico, and obviously that's the area that the National Hurricane Center has marked. And again, none of this is going to develop, at least in the Bahamas or the Gulf of Mexico, but keep in mind that the heavy rainfall threat that will be a huge issue here, especially for Florida, and I might go over that in the next when I show you the models, but that is the threat. And heavy rainfall, once again, number one killer when it comes to tropical systems, but you don't need heavy rainfall to get tropical systems, but that will be the case here over the next several days, and as we continue here throughout the weekend over the southeast. Meanwhile, in the Gulf, not the Gulf of Mexico, but it is actually, or I should say actually, Gulf of America. Forgot of the name change, but whatever. But meanwhile, in the Eastern Pacific, you do see quite a string of activity we have here. We have Tropical Storm Octave, looking pretty decent on satellite right now, although not really forecast to intensify much. I'll show you the National Hurricane Center track in just a moment, but we do have Tropical Storm Octave here, and it's going to kind of just, meander around here over the next several days, and eventually begin to head into cooler water and die out, and not be much of a concern for us in terms of impacts. Although the area that we do need to watch is 99E here, which, as you can see, pretty much, it is a tropical storm now. And as I said before, let's actually see, have advisories begun yet? No, they have not, but I know because I've saw the ATCF for 18Z, and they did include Tropical Storm Priscilla. So again, probably expecting advisories to begin on Priscilla here in the Eastern Pacific very, very shortly. And you can generally see just by the satellite, this definitely has a closed low-level center, and this also has kind of a banding feature here setting up. So definitely a tropical system at this point. And this will probably bring some rainfall to Mexico too. More than likely going to stay off the coast of Mexico, which is a good thing. And then we also have another area here, kind of another wave in here that is producing convection. And this is the area that we're probably going to have to watch that'll develop as well, just off the southwestern coast of Mexico over the next several days. Here's the track of Tropical Storm Octave. And once again, not really worried about this because you can see here it's just going to kind of meander around in the Eastern Pacific for the next several days. Probably just hold on to tropical storm intensity, and then eventually, as this starts to feel the effects of some of these cooler waters here, it'll probably weaken and then just wither away into irrelevance, and we won't have to worry about it. Here's the track for 99E and likely already Priscilla, and this also will stay off the coast of Mexico. You can see pretty much all of the tracks here just bring this to the west-northwest and straight to the northwest, and this stays off the coast. Maybe we might see some rainfall, and maybe as this eventually heads northward, some of the moisture might advect itself into northeastern Mexico and into the southwestern United States. That might be something we need to watch. But in general, in terms of direct impacts to Mexico, not expected at this time. But this might actually strengthen quite a bit, and you can see with the model intensity guidance, most of them actually agree on this becoming a pretty decent storm. Already a Cat 1 intensity. In fact, quite a few even show Category 2 intensity as well. And I believe the AVNI here, that's the GFS, they even bring this to Cat 3. intensity. So this might be a pretty potent storm here, and maybe another hurricane to add to the list in the Eastern Pacific. And why is this all happening? Once again, as I said, we do have a small little convectively coupled Kelvin wave in the Eastern Pacific here. And notice as well how it's actually pretty small, but you do see here right now generally around the black line where, is initialized for today. And there generally is some sort of weak convectively coupled Kelvin wave in the Eastern Pacific that's fueling activity. And a few days ago we had one that came through. And obviously that's also helping, spark up our wave in the Eastern Atlantic. But I would assume that Eastern Pacific activity is definitely going to continue for at least the next several days and maybe the next week or two. Because look at this cell of rising motion that we have here that eventually becomes prevalent in the Eastern Pacific and then spills its way into the Atlantic. And as I mentioned before, not only are we going to have to watch the Eastern Pacific further, but we're also going to have to watch the Caribbean too, because this traverses over the Eastern Pacific and in general the Western Hemisphere. And we know this time of the year in October, this can help fuel Central American gyre events, and we could see activity from that in both the Eastern Pacific and the Atlantic, and especially the Atlantic as October. The Caribbean, especially the Western Caribbean, is much more favored for activity, and sometimes we get some pretty intense storms in the Caribbean in October. So we're going to have to watch this very closely, although this will help in terms of priming the environment too. In the MDR, well, we kind of have the convectively coupled Kelvin wave here that came through, and that's definitely helping give a kickstart to our system that we're watching in the Eastern Atlantic. And you can see that play out very well here on the GFS. And I think the GFS is probably the most aggressive model showing development here in the Atlantic over the next several days. You see here our wave comes together. It takes a few days, but roughly by mid to late next week, it's already a developing tropical system here, and then intensifies quite a bit and probably becomes a strong hurricane here in the northwestern MDR. But luckily, as you can see here, around 5, 6, 7 days out, this gets close to the islands, but the GFS ends up actually having this veer just northward, and then eventually, the further I take it out in the run, it brings this to the north and then kind of, slows down a little bit, but then gets picked up by some sort of front action or some sort of trough here, and then, ends up going away off into the northeastern Atlantic or the northwestern Atlantic. The northeastern Atlantic would be here, but the GFS obviously does have pretty strong development of our wave here in the Atlantic. What about the European model? And the European model is a little bit less aggressive, I will say. They do show some development occurring here, but that's probably at best a weak tropical system, maybe a weak tropical storm or tropical depression. And this does get very close to the islands too, although the European also kind of veers this just northward of the islands. But I guess the European is also, latching on to maybe the fact that we have more dry air in the Eastern Atlantic here. And I did mention that there is an upper level low or a TUT somewhere in the northwestern Atlantic, so maybe the European is catching on to that fact, but some development does still occur. So again, if you are in the northern Caribbean islands here, you're going to have to want to watch this very closely over the next several days. And then looking at the European ensembles, on the other hand, they tell a pretty different story. Quite a few of them actually developing this area, and you even see quite a few strong ensembles here. And notice, actually there are a few strong ensembles that take this storm out to sea, but there's also quite a bit of strong ones here that bring this directly over some islands of the northern Caribbean. So we're going to have to watch this wave here very, very closely over the next several days. And even if this will not be direct impact to the northern Caribbean, you'll want to monitor it very closely because, again, once this does get towards the northwestern MDR and generally towards the northern Caribbean portion of the Atlantic, that's roughly 6 to 7 days out. And that a lot can change in sometimes just a matter of 2 to 3 days. I mean, we saw quite a huge track shift when we were tracking Imelda here off the southeast coast. It went from one day where all the models were showing a potential landfall to the next run, or literally the next day, all the models shifted off the southeast coast, and Imelda ended up staying off the southeast coast, and we did not get a landfall. So we're going to have to watch here very closely over the next week or so, especially for our friends in the northern Caribbean islands, the latest trends with whatever happens here in the MDR. And then obviously want to show you the Google AI ensembles and see what they do. And most of them, unlike the Euro, actually keep this, and just like the GFS, keep this north of the Caribbean islands. I mean, we do have one or two that do cross some of these islands here, but they are weak. But in general, the model consensus remains just to the northwest of the Caribbean, and then eventually it begins to turn north, and then northeast in the Atlantic. And maybe Bermuda might actually have to watch out for this one down the line, but that's really stretching it. That's getting towards 9 to 10 days when Bermuda might have to watch. So I wouldn't be too alarmed just yet, but looks like the models are, pretty solid on our area here to watch in the MDR, and it's looking more and more likely that this might be our next potential tropical storm here in the Atlantic. But before I end off here, I do really quickly want to show you, and I'll show you with the GFS here, the rainfall that we're going to have in the next several days here in the Atlantic, mainly to show you the amount of rainfall we're going to have here off the southeast coast. And you do see, especially even as we head into early next week, already quite a bit of rainfall happens here, already several inches just off the southeastern coast of Louisiana and in the central Gulf, and that is associated with the low pressure that the National Hurricane Center has marked there, and also quite a bit of rainfall right along the Florida East Coast, even leading up to portions of Georgia and South Carolina here. That's also associated with another area of low pressure and in general energy that is going to be over the southeast here, producing heavy rainfall, again associated with the front that we have draped here over the central Atlantic, and that's also going to bring rainfall to the Bahamas too in the next several days as well. And then obviously you see here the signal for rainfall that follows the track of whatever potential system develops here in the MDR. So definitely a few things to keep in mind as we continue throughout this weekend and then eventually head into next week. And obviously we will be watching it all very closely here on this YouTube channel. So if you are new to my channel and you found today's video interesting, as always, I would recommend for you to like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure to turn on the notification bell too, so you can get videos the moment I upload them, and also whenever I decide to go live as well. So keep all of those things in mind. But with that being said, I'm going to end it off for today. That's going to do it for everything I pretty much have to say, at least for today. So make sure to stay safe, enjoy the rest of your weekend. But of course, as always, I'll be back with more tomorrow. See you then.